This is the billion-dollar question we are going to answer for you today. How does a 10-table restaurant in Harlem become a $2.7 billion CPG acquisition?
Distribution is destiny.
A lot of the tables are owned by people who are presumed to be in the actual mafia, right? You literally feel like you're in an episode of The Goodfellas. My father-in-law, they jacked open his car and filled it with cases of the wine that he said he liked.
This is something you can do today as a small business, and most brands do not get this correct. When I got married, what did I ask for you specifically?
I think something B2B marketers don't understand that they can learn from Rayo's is how important it is to have. So, I will set it up. This is the billion-dollar question we are going to answer for you today. How does a 10-table restaurant in Harlem become a $2.7 billion CPG acquisition? We are referring, of course, to Campbell's purchase of Rayo's in 2023 for $2.7 billion.
Such a sick upgrade, by the way, for Campbell's to go from soup to sauce.
Yeah, this is a cute coup for Campbell's. Coup for Campbell's.
So good. Moving out of the soup business into the sauce business.
And I think what we will show you is that Rayo's followed a very particular playbook, a very particular approach to marketing, which Jon and I have been practicing for almost a decade. We ourselves have been learning this playbook. This is the Ehrenberg-Bass playbook, and it is the idea of mental and physical availability and growing your mental and physical availability in order to grow your brand. And Rayo's is a true case study in this approach. And an interesting tension maybe in this episode will be, did they do this intentionally or not? Did they sort of like accidentally do Ehrenberg-Bass style marketing, or did they know it was Ehrenberg-Bass style marketing? And I think the answer is probably both. It probably didn't start with any knowledge of Ehrenberg-Bass, but it definitely got there. And the reason we know that, and I'd say what like originally put Rayo's on our radar, other than the delicious sauce, which we consume in large quantities, was this article in the Wall Street Journal in 2023. Okay, and this was when Rayo's was purchased by Campbell's, and there was a quote from the CEO of Rayo's, and it said, and I quote to you, "We focused on increasing mental awareness and physical availability. In other words, pump money into marketing so people know about them and widen distribution so people can buy them. The bet is that they will keep buying them." That was the playbook for Rayo's. Sovos executives followed it like a recipe. So I was very excited about this. You may remember I sent this to you at the time because, to my knowledge, this was the first ever overt reference to Ehrenberg-Bass in a mainstream American newspaper, the Wall Street Journal. They actually didn't say the word Ehrenberg-Bass. Even they didn't know what they were referencing. But mental and physical availability, those are the terms. Those are the copyrighted terms from the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows a little bit that this is an old playbook. It's an old recipe, actually, that I would say
An ancient recipe.
Ehrenberg-Bass has helped to formalize. It was probably informal, and they helped to make it formal. But even the idea that they talk about mental awareness and physical availability indicates it's probably a little bit accidental or a little bit their own recipe or playbook. Because they're not using the exact language.
This guy, this CEO who had this quote in the Wall Street Journal, Tom Lockman, I believe is his name. You know where he came from? You know what his pedigree is?
It's got to be CPG something.
His pedigree is pedigree. He's from Mars, which is one of the most famous Ehrenberg-Bass shops in the world. Before then, he was from P&G, another famous Ehrenberg-Bass shop. So I'd say there's about a 0% chance that this guy did not know he was applying the Ehrenberg-Bass playbook.
You had me at his pedigree is pedigree.
His pedigree is pedigree. Thank you.
But I agree with you. If he comes from Mars, Mars is a private company that has funded more Ehrenberg-Bass research than probably any company in the world. And they get it 3 years in advance. And then 3 years later, it goes out into the public domain as peer-reviewed research, I believe. So that makes a lot of sense.
So it probably started as an accident, but then it became intentional. I think something B2B marketers don't understand that they can learn from Rayo's is how important it is to have mental and physical availability. In other words, to be easy to mind and easy to find. And that's really what Rayo's did. They piggybacked on the mental availability of the restaurant, and they scaled it through physical availability, aka distribution, so that if you want Rayo's, you can buy it in pretty much any store in America now.
I would say B2B is the opposite, actually. this is an example where you have huge mental availability. It's mythical, this place. And then they pair that mental availability with physical availability. The problem that B2B marketers have is they only focus on physical availability, events and sales,
yes.
and they don't actually invest in mental availability. So like this is the opposite, as B2B often is.
Right. And you need both, right? If everyone's heard of
Absolutely.
you but they can't buy you, you're not going to grow. If everyone can buy you but nobody's heard of you, you're not going to grow.
Right.
These are the two pillars. You
These
need
are the
mental
twin pillars
of
marketing
success,
science.
of
Right.
marketing science.
Right.
So Johnny, my beloved, mi amore, why don't you tell us a little about the history of this mythical restaurant and mythical sauce?
The early history is just that this guy, Charles Rao, although today GPT told me it was Joshua Rao. Charles sounds more like the case, but let's find either Charles or Joshua Rao.
Charles or Josh, neither confirm nor deny.
Right. I mean, he's an Italian American. He comes from Italy in the 1890s. He settles in Harlem, it sounds like, which it turns out is not part of the Bronx. And he sets up this little restaurant that becomes just a neighborhood joint. And it's just a great local place where you get home cooking. And it becomes a place that is so beloved that people just go there every Sunday, for example, to have Sunday sauce. And it just becomes a tradition. And so people kind of informally have a table reserved. And this is just how it goes for a very long period of time.
Yeah, the amount of time. I mean, let's just pause there. We always talk about brand as a long-term investment. How old is Rao's? The story starts in 1896, right? It's a very old brand.
And the idea of the sauce doesn't happen literally for probably almost 100 years after the founding of the place. So it just runs as a local restaurant. It becomes more famous, I believe, in 1977 because the New York Times writes this article essentially featuring it saying, this is a great place. You're going to love it. I think it becomes more popular at some point because things like all the kind of like Goodfellas and A Bronx Tale and The Godfather and Sopranos become these important cultural touchstones. But it's basically just a local restaurant. But then it starts to grow in fame, become much more mythical. And the real thing that happens is it's a 10-table restaurant. And the people who go every week. So there's basically just no ability to actually get a reservation at this place. It becomes impossible to this day, think about the wedding story. Like you cannot get a table no matter how connected you are, how much you want it. So
because the tables are owned, which is, by the way, this is just amazing because restaurants, you don't really think about innovation in the business model of restaurants. But to my knowledge, there's only one restaurant in America where the tables are literally owned by families and have to lend their table to somebody to get a reservation, right?
It's an incredible story about heritage and tradition and myth. And the idea of tradition will play a little bit into the category entry points we'll talk about. But the core idea is this guy, at this point, it's this guy, Frank Pellegrino Sr. I mean, talk about like the royals. I mean, you have the Pellegrino family, the Rao's family, two of the great Italian brands.
We have to pause on this guy, Frank Pellegrino Sr., because I did not know this, and this completely blew my mind. This guy, Frank Pellegrino Sr., who's the leader of Rao's in the 1970s, this guy is not, it's not just that there's like, a link to the Goodfellas and the Sopranos. This guy is in the Goodfellas and the Sopranos. Yes.
There you go.
Those of you who watch The Sopranos, which I'm sure is pretty much everyone since it's arguably the greatest show of all time, this is the FBI director in The Sopranos, who every year Tony Soprano sends him a plate of gabagool, which he shares with the other officers at the FBI. That guy is the leader of Rao's. So like a big part of the mystique of Rao's is this mafia connection,
no question,
right?
No question.
And, we can neither confirm nor deny how firm it is, but like part of the reason you can't get a table is because a lot of the tables are owned by people who are presumed to be in the actual mafia, right?
Yeah, it's probably the nearest thing you can get to like any of those scenes in Goodfellas or The Godfather or any of these famous The Sopranos, any of these movies. It's the nearest thing. Well, you can't get into it, but if you could, it's the nearest thing you can get. You're bottling the fame and the nostalgia.
I agree that you can't get into it, Johnny, but this is a great time for me to flex on the episode and let everyone know that Rao's, despite being the hardest to get into restaurant in the United States, I myself, Peter Weinberg the 14th, I have been to Rao's multiple times, actually. And I can confirm, the food is very good, but there's probably 100 restaurants in New York with better Italian food. What it does have is this vibe, right? Like you literally feel like you're in an episode of The Goodfellas. I don't know if everyone there is actually in the mob, but they definitely look like they're in the mob, right? In fact, I have a great story about Rao's. Would you like to hear an incredible tale of Rao's?
That's exactly what we're here for.
Just to lean into the mythology. So I got to go there with my father-in-law, who knew somebody who had a table. And we're sitting there, And my father-in-law kind of casually remarks to the waiter that he really likes the wine. He says, "This is good wine." And the waiter's like, "Oh, thank you so much." That was it. That was the end of the incident. At the end of the night, my father-in-law returns to his car, which is parked outside Rayo's. He opens up the trunk, and it's filled with cases of this wine. In other words, they jacked open his car and filled it with cases of the wine that he said he liked. So again, you see sort of like the mythology of this place and how weird and like special it is.
Yeah, the myth is a really important part of this marketing story because it becomes so famous. You know, for everybody's probably got a story like this. I went and it was an incredible vibe. I went and they jacked open my trunk and put a bunch of really good Italian wine into it. But it's so famous, he has to say no to everybody who wants a table.
Right.
So then how do you turn this place, this experience, how do you turn that into a more scalable? It can't scale by definition. It's 10 tables. You've got to go with what's called a brand extension. You go from being a restaurant to being a product. The product is actually sauce. And it's the birth then of this now famous CPG brand we call it Rayo's Specialty Foods. And the first product is just the sauce that you get in the store, in the restaurant.
Right. So just to go a little deeper on this, right? So
to simmer a bit more on this sauce. To simmer
a bit more on this concept. You know, the place has incredible mental availability. Everyone wants to go there, but it has very little physical availability because it's 10 seats, so nobody can go there. And of course, the fact that nobody can go there means everybody wants to go there even more, right? So it has an oversupply of mental availability and an undersupply of physical availability. The restaurant business, fundamentally, you can't really have massive physical availability unless you're, McDonald's and you're on every corner, right? So the only way for them to capitalize on that mental availability is to actually shift what the product is from a restaurant to a jar of sauce, which can scale physical availability.
But let's talk a little bit more about scale, because how they scale is incredibly important. It's important to note that when they put the Rayo's experience into a jar, they have a very specific vision for what the product is going to be. It starts with the product. And the product is going to be an authentic, high-quality Italian sauce like the one your grandmother made. And it's going to be one that is the best ingredients, no sugar. And for all these reasons, it's a premium product. Everything about it is premium. Just like the Rayo's, reservation is premium, you can't get it. This sauce at the start is a premium sauce, and you can't get it most places either. They only distribute in a bunch of local select gourmet shops where they can go to market with a sauce that is $6 when it hits the market. Most other sauces at that time, the mass sauces like Classico and Ragu and Prego, those are $3. So it's a premium product with premium ingredients and a premium price. It's twice the price, which is a very important point about this. So even kind of when they go into distribution, they still do it in this patented Rayo's premium exclusive kind of myth-making way.
That is consistent with the heritage of the brand.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And I think that's really what we want to get into. We want to get into what happens, of course, in 2017, this company Sovos acquires Rayo's. And that's when it really starts to scale because they're the ones who really apply this Ehrenberg-Bass playbook to the sauce. And then ultimately this culminates in 2024 with the acquisition of Sovos by Campbell's for $3 billion.
Yeah, but see, this is like the story we now all know. But there's very little for most marketers to learn from a big company buys a brand and scales it through a bunch of relationships only a big company has. This is really a story about a small restaurant with a big brand that then is going to have select scale. So it's basically like this premium product. And again, these select gourmet garages, so to speak. Balducci's apparently a renowned Italian brand in New York. And so basically that's what they're doing is they're basically taking this product. They're going to put it in a bunch of select stores. They're going to premium price it. So I actually learned in the kind of process of researching this, there's an idea called distribution is destiny. So what is distribution is destiny? It's actually two-part. One, as you said, like you have to distribute the product. If you don't distribute the product, nobody can buy the product. You can't make any money. But also where you distribute the product is super important too. Distributing it in, some mass kind of, low market supermarket is not going to help with premium pricing. Putting it in Balducci's or in Gourmet Garage, a place like that, is going to support the premium position, the premium perception, and allow you then to scale a premium product, which has higher margins, which allow you to then cut better deals with distributors, keep on investing in the product. And so this idea of distribution being destiny is super important to how they grow, because they grow very locally and very selectively at the start.
But there's another important insight in there, which is that your tactical choices, so distribution, aka placement's one of the 4 Ps,
Yep,
so it's
yep.
a tactic, that is consistent with their strategy, which is their positioning, their
Yes.
premium positioning, and their target audience, which we'll get into. So I think this is a nice segue to the format of the episode,
Right.
where we basically want to break down the brand and talk about what strategic and tactical choices they made and how consistent these are with Ehrenberg-Bass ideology or philosophy. So we learned from our mentor, Mark Ritson, proper job of the marketer, right, is segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Those are the strategic choices you make. And then, of course, the famous 4 Ps, price, product, promotion, and placement. So I think we want to go through Rayo's and talk about the choices they made strategically and tactically in order to grow it into this massive CPG empire. So why don't we start with segmentation? Segmentation is, who do you go after in the market? You know, the market for pasta sauce, which is what Rayo's is. In theory, it's like pretty much everyone in America who cooks at all uses some sort of pasta sauce. So it's a mass market.
It is.
But they didn't necessarily target the mass market. They did what Ehrenberg-Bass recommends, which is quote-unquote sophisticated mass marketing, where they went after a very large segment, but it was a pretty clearly defined segment. Why don't you tell us a little, Johnny, about the segmentation choice that Rayo's made?
I don't know the segmentation choice that Rayo's made, obviously. Like, it's happened back in, the early 90s. But my sense is they recognized very clearly that there was a mass market, but there was a specific part of the mass market, a specific segment that was not being catered to. And that was kind of the premium segment within the sauce category. And those people tend to probably be a bit younger and more open to like new products. They're going to have higher disposable incomes. There's obviously this trend from moving away from like very sugar heavy products to no sugar products. So there's like a health trend involved here. And so these are some of the core ideas I believe that they probably thought about. But the reality is they probably were just selling realistically to, this is such an incredible brand. If we just distribute it in places like New York and New Haven and Philadelphia in gourmet markets, there's probably a premium, almost like Italian-American customer who's going to buy this and use it for their Sunday supper, which is kind of like a hallowed tradition in the Italian-American community. It's probably maybe that targeted. And then, of course, it grows from there. But that's probably what's happening. And then it will bleed into like obviously a more mass approach.
Right. Well, it was probably an accident at first, but it actually did become very intentional. And the way you know that is that you can actually look at the investor language that Sovos has in some of their like financial forms and disclosures. And that is very much the type of consumer base they talk about. What you talked about, young people, richer people, people who care about quality and taste and no sugar, right? So they chose to target, as you put it, this sort of like overlooked segment. But it's not a niche segment. It's a very large segment. It's basically like youngish rich people or like relatively wealthy people who care about actually having good pasta sauce, right? It's a very clear segment, but it's not a small segment. It's a big segment.
Yeah, I think it's important, though, to basically divide two ideas here. Kind of the current language that Sovos is using to describe Rayo's in the current instantiation of the product versus how it started in, let's call it like the 80s and the 90s. In my sense, that was very much like a founder-led vision. This guy Pellegrino, who was he, the police commissioner?
Yeah, the FBI director.
FBI director Pellegrino. I think it's just simply like, hey, we have an uncompromising vision of what a great pasta sauce is, something we serve in our restaurant. And it's basically, it's homemade, it's small batch, it's premium products. That's what it is. And people want our restaurant so much, so I'm just going to distribute it in the local stores. Again, being very select about distribution. Distribution is destiny. I think it's just starting there back in the 90s. And I don't believe it's going any broader than that. So it's just probably selling more to the people they know want to go to the store, like, right, or the restaurant rather. Like,
and
I think
now,
that's
of course,
where it
this
starts.
is another thing I think we've learned about targeting over the years from many of our mentors, including, Les Bennett and Peter Field, is that if you're a small brand, you can kind of start with a niche, but as you grow bigger, you need to outgrow the niche, right? You don't grow big by targeting a small customer segment. They got their start maybe targeting this small segment of people in New York, right, who would have already heard of Rayo's, but now it really is a mass market product.
So like, for example, like this idea of having a core segment you want to target. And then it's actually just keeping to the core at the start. It's probably saying like it's people in New York, then it's New Haven, then it's Boston, then it's Philly, then it's Chicago, then it's LA, basically big metropolitan areas, arguably with even Italian populations. And it is then distributing in all of those places to the core segment, distributing a premium product at premium prices in locations that are premium. Like, I think it's probably that simple. So it's more, you are going to start small, but like keeping the core as you grow incrementally allows you to maintain the premium pricing to get to the mass distribution, the masstige part of it, the prestige at mass scale.
Right. Which I think if you're a B2B marketer, the lesson is, if you're starting out, you could focus on maybe a particular vertical or a particular type of company size within that vertical. But over time, incrementally, as you're putting it, it's not, you don't flip a switch from the niche to the mass market. You slowly expand the niche as you grow, and that is how you grow, right? By reaching more and more customers.
I remember Geico once I saw their market share, and this is maybe at peak Geico, and obviously Geico is backed by Warren Buffett, who, in addition to being one of the great business minds, is one of the great marketing minds.
And is a close personal friend of ours and a longtime fan of the podcast.
Yes, of course.
Warren, what up?
Sorry,
what up, bro?
Warren. Sorry, Warren. Geico over 20 years grew like not even a point in market share a year. So over 20 years, it grew like from 3% share to 17% share. So this process we're talking about, whether it's Geico, whether it's Rayo's, it's like if you just pick up half a point of share a year over 20 years, you get 10 points of share, which ends up becoming a very big business. I think Rayo's has 12% of the market today, So it is one of these very slow and deliberate and selective strategies. It's really incredible textbook distribution and marketing. Like, it is the mental and physical availability playbook, like with extreme financial discipline.
Yes. So I feel we covered the segmentation and targeting decisions they made. The next step in the strategic process is how you position the brand. And this is where I think Rayo's made some very, very interesting and very wise choices. So let's talk a little about how Rayo's positioned the brand. And I think even before we do that, maybe sort of like a mental model of what is positioning. I think it's how you come to mind in the brains of your buyers. And I think in the Ehrenberg-Bass universe, there's kind of like two key decisions, which are what are the buying situations or category entry points that you choose to address? And then what are the distinctive brand assets or brand codes that you link to those buying situations? So let's talk a little about some of the decisions Rayo's made. I think we did some synthetic research on this as well to figure out what are some buying situations Rayo's has associated itself with. Johnny, do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I think the obvious decision that they made at the time, though I wouldn't call it necessarily, they wouldn't have known about category entry points because I don't think Jen Romani could even coin the frame or the term yet, is just simply we're going to sell a high quality sauce to people who, for their most important or most kind of luxurious or most traditional meal of the week, which is probably Sunday supper, right? Like Italian families get together, you eat sauce, every Sunday. This is a premium product for a premium occasion. So it's like when I need a sauce for a premium meal, that could be your family. It could be you're having people over for dinner party. A dinner party. Right. It's like, I got to have something that basically tastes like it's like I homemade it.
Right.
Like it was
I'm
small
learning
batch.
to make pasta and I don't want to invest in making my own delicious pasta, but then use a shitty sauce, right? I want a high-end sauce, right? So these are very specific and discrete buying situations, right? It's not, where they kind of underperform is, hey, I have two-year-olds at home that won't eat anything and I'm just going to sort of like feed them whatever the fastest possible meal I can is, and I'm going to buy, Prego or Ragu, which sort of overperform on those more like everyday buying occasions.
This is not an everyday sauce. This is a special sauce.
It may have become one over time, but to our point, it's not how it started, right?
No, it does not. It does
so
not.
This
it starts in sauce.
Just like Corona chose to go after the beach buying occasion and Guinness chose to go after the pub buying occasion. This is Rayo's going after the special sauce occasion, essentially.
Which is something people do. Like on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, you probably want a more special meal. If you want a home-cooked special meal, then you're going to get the special home-cooked sauce. Yeah, I mean, if you're, so again, if Rayo's is targeting the special sauce occasion, not the everyday occasion, a B2B parallel might be something like people at the end of the quarter or end of the year, have budget left over, target that. It's a very specific special occasion where like they have to get rid of the budget. It's not necessarily an everyday occasion like I need to do my weekly reporting to my boss.
Right. Or like actually we just did some research recently on financial advisors. We did this category entry point research, and there really are these discrete buying situations. People are not usually in market to switch financial advisors. But there's two buying occasions caught my attention. One is a sudden wealth windfall. That often puts you in market for a new financial advisor. And then there's a divorce where you need to divide up your assets. The first one is the most common buying situation. The second one was the least common buying situation. As an entrepreneur, by the way, this one really resonated with me because I feel like I'm always teetering on the edge of those two buying situations. Like, are we going to get a sudden windfall or am I going to get divorce? But the point is those are two very specific buying situations. And if you're marketing to high net worth individuals trying to get them to choose your financial advisors, you need to make a choice. You know, are you going after the, hey, recently divorced, think about switching to our financial advisor? Or, hey, did you suddenly come into $1 bajillion? Think about switching to our financial advisors, right? So those are like the B2B equivalents of everyday cooking versus special sauce occasion.
There's also another idea here. This they started in pasta, right? So it's a brand. Remember, it's a brand extension. It is this mythical restaurant that they then build a physical product around sauce. So then they have a brand, and then they did what's called a line extension. They moved from sauce into the next category, still in the foods world. Do you know what the second product that they introduced was?
Was it, I don't know, actually, you tell me.
I didn't know either, but it makes a ton of sense when you hear it. Pasta.
Pasta. Got it.
If you have sauce, what do you need to put sauce on?
Right. Pasta.
So it's like,
which, by the way, there's another category entry point thing is you try to figure out what people purchase concurrently in that situation. So if you're thinking about the special sauce occasion, well, what else do they need in the special sauce occasion? They need a special pasta. So it actually helps inform also your product decisions as well as your advertising, marketing
category
decisions.
entry points are, you know, what do they buy? When do they buy? How do they buy? What else do they buy it with? I mean, you buy pasta and you buy sauce. Also, pasta puts you more into the everyday convenience category versus the special sauce. So obviously, if you own Sunday, you'd also love to own Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday,
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as Apollonia famously said.
So the idea is you want to maybe start with a single audience, which is like premium consumers of pasta or sauce. Then you want to move...
And a single occasion,
which is Sunday. And then you want to basically say like, okay, maybe it's not just premium consumers, it's also everyday consumers or kind of like mid-market consumers. And then you want to sell them not just special things, but everyday things. And that's pasta. Pasta's like that for everybody.
But still with some focus, right? Like people cook a lot of things every day. This is when you're cooking Italian food, right? When you're trying to make pasta.
So it's, you know, it's just interesting. Like they had, you know, you have special occasions, you have everyday convenience, but often it's talked about as share of plate. You know, if you are a brand like Rayo's, you want to have share of plate. The after pasta, they moved into the next thing, which is actually frozen foods. And frozen foods plays more into the convenience occasion you mentioned earlier.
Right. And that's the mass market. But it took them a long time to get there.
That's a 20, 25, 30 year process. But this is like the progress here is super important. Over a 30-year period, it was maybe a special occasion, which is just sauce, to more everyday occasions, pasta and soups, to then every single occasion, which is convenience. Like I have all these frozen products and I pull them out any day of the week when I need them. And so kind of from like special to like, you know, every day to convenience, like you are really mass market at that point, but it takes 30 years to do that.
I think this is a great transition to distinctive brand assets, right? The buying situations change over time as you expand. What does not change, what stays the same, is the actual branding or the distinctive brand asset. So as a reminder, these are things like the Geico Gecko, you know, your logos, your taglines, your colors, things that make sure you get credit for your work and that people know the ad or the in-store placement is from your brand and not a competitive brand. And Rayo's, I think, has done some very, very good work here, right? Because they have some very distinctive brand assets. So let's talk about what some of those are.
I actually do not know how well Rayo's managed its distinctive brand assets. This to me is still an open question. As I understand it, even the storefront, which is on every bottle now, you see this logo and it's got the red storefront with the Rayo's in white. Apparently that is again something that they evolved over time. It did not have that awning, and now it has that awning, and now it's on the bottle. But I think this is something also that they evolve. Rayo's is a traditional brand, so I think they didn't change quickly. They changed slowly, right? They evolved slowly, which is important. I think you want to evolve your stuff slowly, but they've evolved into a very nice place. And that is essentially the current brand architecture or brand identity.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that make Rayo's very distinctive from, say, Prego, right? First of all, there is the restaurant and the association with the restaurant. The restaurant itself is incredibly distinctive. We talked about there's tables. The tables are owned. It's also bright red restaurant in the middle of Harlem, right? So it actually like stands out on the street. And now that's on every single jar. You know, it's got the name Rayo's, which is kind of a distinctive name. It's got a bunch of vowels. It's sort of hard to pronounce. It's, you know, it's not Prego or Ragu.
It's distinctive in that you don't know how to pronounce it.
Right. It's distinctive in that nobody could figure out how to pronounce it. Also, very interestingly, it's in a glass jar, which is very unusual for the category. This is something we also learned from Ritson, is that you want to be distinctive to the category. So you don't want to blend into the category. You want to stand out. You know, if every brand is blue, you want to be orange. In this case, if every pasta is in a plastic jar, you know, you want to be in a glass jar, which, by the way, is also, of course, premium. Glass is more premium than plastic, so it's consistent with this strategic choice they made to go after premium audiences and premium buying occasions.
I also feel that the price is one of the distinctive things about the brand. It was the only product on the market that was $6 when every other product was $3. And then you pair that, yes, with a glass bottle. You pair it with probably some distinctiveness around the fact that it was kind of this beautiful Italian off-white versus, what is it? I think Prego and Ragu are like blue.
Yeah, they're blue and red.
Right, blue and red. And red is just
this
a category
black.
color.
This is black and gold, which is totally unusual.
The new version, the reserve version, is the black version. I don't think the original version. I think the original version was an off-white like your shirt. But I think the price is a big part of the distinctiveness, actually. So again, it is not clear to me if they followed the distinctive now they follow them to a T. Now they've got a really incredible bottle. The little Rayo's kind of image is more and more distinctive. But this to me is like a fast follow or a late follow versus maybe the distinctiveness, maybe to your point, is in the restaurant actually, and in the price.
Who cares? I mean, that's maybe how they started, but how they scaled is by pretty meticulously applying these things. In fact, they had a Winter Olympics ad this year, which was a big breakthrough for them. And if you look at that ad, that is like a textbook Ehrenberg-Bass style advertisement. It is mass market, so it's massive reach, and it's very well branded. It opens with the Rayo's logo. It's got the Rayo's logo on every slide. It's talking about those specific buying situations. So I think it's been a very well managed brand once it was taken over by Savos and then bought by Campbell's,
Yes.
which is itself a very well managed branding organization.
I think today the distinctive brand assets are impeccably managed. I think it's really well done. I think they've done a wonderful job. I'm just saying this is something that actually small brands can do better than big brands today. Is you can actually develop distinctive assets that are unique to the category, like they're yellow or they're off-white instead of blue. It's glass versus plastic. It's high price versus low price. This is something you can do today as a small business. And most brands do not get this correct. I'm not sure Rayo's got it correct or not. They've gotten it correct today, but it's just something that a small business should think about. It's like this idea of distinctive brand assets and how you scale uniqueness over time.
And then I think the final part of positioning, and this is probably where my own personal opinion has changed over time. I think I was always pretty hardcore on Ehrenberg-Bass. It's just CEPs and distinctive brand assets. That's all there is. But I think as we've grown our own business, I've developed an appreciation also for this idea of really like a value proposition and like what is kind of like the special offering of the actual product. And is that distinctive and relevant to the purchase occasions? And I think it's just worth pointing out like Rayo's has a pretty unique value proposition, and it's pretty consistent in everything they do. They talk about no added sugar. They talk about Italian tomatoes. They talk about slow simmered, small batches. So they really sort of like go after this pretty distinctive and unique value proposition in the market of these mass market pasta sauces.
I think it's excellent counter positioning. Everything in the market at that point was mass and was high sugar and was cheap and was about kind of like basically price. They did the exact opposite. They did price in the exact opposite way. It's not low price, it's high price. It's high quality, it's high quality ingredients, homemade and high priced and luxury. And that's an incredibly smart idea to counter position. It's how you can actually get a kind of like foothold or more like a shelf space in the market.
Yeah, and these are not one-offs. Like, this is a pattern. You can actually observe this in many different categories and businesses. Haagen-Dazs, I think, is a fun example of, like, at the time, there were only shitty ice cream brands. There was no premium ice cream brand. And then a guy in New York, of course, also like Rayo's, decided he was going to create a premium ice cream category. And he made up a name, Haagen-Dazs, that he thought sounded premium and distinctive. And he used high quality, not low quality ingredients, and he priced it in a premium way and distributed it in premium locations. So it's kind of like the proto Rayo's in the ice cream category.
And even Carbone is essentially running this playbook now today. I mean, Carbone became famous to me because they were charging $72 for a pasta.
Right.
So again, like, the high price is the point.
And in fact, just to bring it full circle, the CEO of Savos, aka Rayo's, is now the CEO of Carbone Fine Foods, right? So in other words, this is all, it sort of may look accidental from the outside, but this is actually somebody who learned a very specific playbook for how to grow a CPG brand, a recipe, applied it to grow Rayo's and sell it to Campbell's for $3 billion, and is now running back the same playbook at Carbone, which is kind of like the modern Rayo's, if you will.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind here that I was thinking about this as Rayo's is basically Hermes. It's Rayo's through the line, right? Everything is Rayo's. It's one restaurant. Every product is Rayo's. And Carbone started with a portfolio of restaurants. Carbone becomes famous for the high pricing, the premium positioning, the impossibility of the table. And then they're now scaling it through Carbone Fine Foods. It's the exact same playbook.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a tasty aperitivo for you. An interview with Mr. Pasta Sauce himself, Eric Skae, the former CEO of Rayo's Specialty Foods. 2 years after Rayo's, he became the CEO of another New York City-based institution, Carbone Fine Food, and turned another mythical restaurant into a successful CPG giant. To learn more about how Eric captured pasta sauce in a bottle not once, but twice, we welcome Mr. Eric Skae to Lab Grown Marketing. It's 2016. You walk into Rayo's. It's a famous brand. There's been some sort of shareholder battle. What were you brought in to do, and what did you kind of discover when you got there?
So first goal was to get the shareholders to agree on something, right? Like that's where it went. And that took 89 days, right? Day 89, we came to an agreement, and the agreement was we were going to sell the company, which for me was unfortunate because what I stepped into was what I would call a well-managed but undermanaged business, right? A lot of opportunity, just a lot of low-hanging fruit where I knew the growth was there. Having had at that point done it for done CPG for 25 years, like there was just signals that this thing could really, really grow. So I did that. I mean, I took it from 5% growth to 40% growth in the first 4 months while fixing the things that I had to fix.
Amazing.
Whether it be on the shareholder side, on the people side, so on and so forth. We had a pretty significant turnover. Me coming in from the outside, people who were loyalists to the old CEO. I get it. It's just the way it happens. And Sharon Stracy had been running it from the beginning, right? But the brand going all the way back to the beginning, and like you guys are a marketing show. So
yeah,
I think it's kind of an interesting one to point out. There was one of the original shareholders, there was 6, was named Joe Morano. His son Jim works with me now, and Jim worked with me at Rayo's. Joe's passed, but I had his archives. Like I got the notes that he wrote in 1991 as they were thinking about Rayo's, and to read, "We will be clean label" in 1991 is just like, to me, that's shocking. Like that was way ahead of like anybody thinking about what
does that mean? What is clean label? I'm not familiar.
Well,
with that term.
More natural. No, none of no sugars, no additives, no, 5 simple ingredients, 6 simple ingredients that made a beautiful product.
So that was kind of where it started with his memo. It sounds like the core belief was the product has to be clean label. And again, far before its time when that was
Far
even like a
before,
trend.
and I think they were out there. He was out there placing it at like $9.99, and there was a little hang tag saying, hard to get into a restaurant, but now you can eat what's at the restaurant. It was really smart marketing from the very beginning. Sharon Stracy, who was one of the shareholders, ended up coming in and running, and like I said, did a really, really good job. Got entrenched in with the Specialty Food Association, really grew there, worked with a retailer, stayed very, very disciplined. And that's why there was a lot of growth opportunity, because she might have been a little too disciplined in terms of the growth approach and a slow growth approach, where it was platformed perfectly for me to go in and do what I did and then pass it on to Sovos and them to be able to do what they did. And now Campbell's being able to do what they're doing. You had a beautiful brand.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So you come in, they already have the jar and they already have the kind of thesis of their positioning, which is we're clean label. Sales were like plateaued. It was at 5% growth year over year. And then you basically take it to 40. That's what happened?
Yeah, give or take. I mean, like I said, and she could have, I think they knew they could go more than 5%. I think they were happy building a nice, profitable brand, which was the other thing that was like shocking to me, was how strong the brand was from a financial perspective when I took it over.
See. So this was not like it wasn't like VC backed. It was like
what
you would now call a bootstrapped business that was just growing profitably but slowly.
If I have the detail right, I think there was $250,000 put into that business to start it. If I have that detail right, because you got to remember, I came in 2016. It started in 92.
Yeah.
So some of what you hear is just legend. It's kind of fairy tale, right? And some of it's real. So I don't know how much.
So that's a pretty good return on investment. $250K to a $4 billion acquisition to Campbell's. I guess if we could just talk, I really want to talk about kind of the brand and the distribution. In Ehrenberg-Bass land, this is called mental and physical availability. So like coming to mind easily and then being easy to find once people actually want it. I guess let's just start with the brand, which you've already talked a little bit about. Rayo's had a brand, right? They have probably the most valuable thing you can have in marketing, which is a famous brand that a lot of people have heard of, but nobody could get at. How did you think about like the role of the brand and knowing it's like a restaurant brand and now you're trying to move it into a sauce brand? Like, what was your just kind of like feeling about how you were going to capitalize on that brand?
Well, they were already obviously a famous restaurant and a sauce brand by that point. I mean, it was built. It's not like I went in and built something from scratch. It was there. So I looked at it and again, kind of, I hate calling it undermanaged, because it was managed to where that the person prior to me wanted to manage it, right? Like it was planned. It was very, very well planned. But to give you an example, like they had prior to me, I came in August of 16. The last Instagram post that in August of 16 was like an Easter post for a holiday gift basket, right? So like there was a lot of like low-hanging fruit from a marketing perspective that I could get at. There was a lot of distribution opportunity, right? Like it was bottom shelved in a lot of places, because you got to remember, they created the premium sauce category.
Yes.
Right? There was not a premium sauce category before Rayo's came in, and they came in and made one.
Right.
And so of course you're going to be bottom shelved and you're going to be looked at because you're $9.99 and you're selling a few units. But there was enough momentum in certain parts of the business, like Whole Foods, Stop and Shop, Publix, like, even Kroger. Like it was small, but you could see it growing every year. And we just had to go in with a growth story plan to say, hey, here's what we're going to do. Bring some new items, put some energy back into Rayo's as a growth driver for the category. And, that's kind of how we talked about it. Is like, we're here to grow your category. We make you more penny profit than everybody else. At the time, I want to say we were driving, 60% of the natural category growth, right? Now Rayo's is between Rayo's and Carbone, we're driving probably 70% right now, maybe even 100 at times of the category growth in pasta sauce. At the time, Rayo's was that person alone that was kind of like driving a significant amount of the growth. So retailers were interested in the brand and knew that they could make a higher ring on it, and their the Rayo's loyal customers were going to come back to pick it up. So it almost became a destination, so people could go get Rayo's. You know what I mean? Like it was that type of feel.
Yeah, I guess like how if you think about you when you came in and they already had like some traction, how intentional were these choices? This is something we were debating on the podcast. Like, did all of this stuff kind of happen by accident, or was there literally a thesis that we're going to create a premium pasta category and capitalize on the value of the restaurant brand? Like,
I think prior to me coming in, that was exactly the thought process. I think Frank Pellegrino, I don't know if it was even capitalizing on the brand. Frank Pellegrino Sr., who passed during the process, he's the one who initially said, let's do a sauce, because he couldn't get people into his restaurant. And he knew there was people that wanted to try the sauce. That's really all it came down to.
Right.
And he wanted to put something good in a jar that represented his restaurant. He wanted something that was very high quality, better than anything out there. And like I did this at Carbone because I heard Frank did it. And again, the difference between what's legend and what's real.
Right.
But, I was told that Frank tasted every batch for the first year before it was allowed to be put in a jar. So I did the same thing launching Carbone. For 1 year straight, I was in a production facility 5 days a week tasting sauce out of a batch before they were allowed to put it in a jar.
That must have been a fun job, Eric. That's a great gig.
I never get sick of sauce. I can
how could you?
I can eat it all day long.
I love that. Okay, got it. So when you say you kind of like put new energy behind this brand that existed and the 5% growth, like what did that mean? Did that mean increasing the advertising budget? Were you more focused on distribution and getting into more stores? Was it both of these things? Like
No,
kind of tactically.
I think I spent $250,000 on advertising, but it was finding out what that platform was. Like, what was the brand? How were we going to bring the brand to life amongst the influencer community that was just starting? Like I said, they hadn't posted on Instagram, period. We started the easy stuff, the stuff that was just sitting there. And like, I came up with a thesis. I said, all right, we're going to post a picture of Italy or a beautifully plated dish. That's it.
Yep.
Like we needed something, right? Like that we were going to do. So we kept very, very focused. And the aim was, how do we increase distribution? How do we increase availability of SKUs, right? So how do we go from 3 to 7 SKUs? How do we go from no SKUs to 5 SKUs? Like it was definitely a very intentional distribution game. And then secondarily, which was interesting, like I work with people who are my generation, so there's terms that people have to Google when we use them.
Yeah.
But we used to say that the product on the West Coast was on layaway. You had to go in and you had to put a down payment on it. You come back the next week to afford it, because like people were charging like $11.99 at the time. So going and working with retailers to show them that, like, if you can get this to a $9.99 or an $8.99, your volume is going to go way up because you're now under that $10 threshold, and you're still making a massive penny profit compared to the rest of the category. So like that was the aim, and it was a ton of education. And I will say, done by the man I referenced, Jim Morano. Like Jim did most of it because we kind of had a divide and conquer. Like I was fixing a shareholder battle and then like hiring banker, so like I went on key meetings with Jim. I was involved in like the Kroger's, Targets, those type of things, but day to day and fighting the fight, out there and showing the penny profit and getting retails dropped and all of those things. That was 100% my sales team.
Interesting. So let's bifurcate these two things of the advertising or the marketing and kind of the distribution piece. It sounds like with the distribution piece, first of all, it sounds like that was really the key thing, was more on the distribution than the advertising. Am I characterizing that correctly, or was it like 50-50 in your mind of how important those two things were?
No. Look, if you go back to my background, I started my career at Arizona ST, and I worked for a guy who was legendary in this business named Mike Schott. And the things I learned from Mike Schott are, you don't market to empty shelves, and you create a brand mantra as what your brand does. So you could ask anybody at Arizona Iced Tea, what do you do at Arizona Iced Tea? And it's very distribution focused. It's, because you don't market to empty shelves.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you do at Arizona Tea? I get eye level I get an eye level shelf next to Snapple, full shelf. I put up 3 signs in every store. I have a price at 99 cents, and I back it up with quality service. End of story, right? Like it was very, very
Yeah.
driven. And you know, that's an easy message to take to your broker, to
Yeah,
take to your
this is
distributor,
brilliant. Don't
to
market to
take to your
empty shelves.
retailer.
It's
You know, so
brilliant.
like, you know, so that's when I started Carbone. It was a big distribution push, because you also have to remember, in my category today, the pasta sauce category, 35% of the decisions are made at the shelf.
Hmm.
When you're in beverage, it used to be like 80, right? Now that's changed, you know, over the years. And when I started my career, single serve beverage was at between 75 and 80% decision made at the shelf. But you got to remember, there was a lot of new brands, because Snapple was new, you know, like Arizona was new. So all these new brands were coming in. Now these brands are established. They have loyal customers. In the beginning, they didn't. But, you know, so maybe beverage is now 50. I don't know. I don't study it anymore. But I know pasta sauce is 35. So I know a third of my customers are going to find the product just because they found it on the shelf. So I have to have availability.
Got it. And the way you got availability, it sounds like pricing was integral to this pitch to these retailers, was basically like, we can command this premium pricing and that will be good margin for you. Thus, you should sort of stock this in your stores. Is that kind of how
Well,
is
you
my
have to
characterizing that? Yeah.
you have to romance, you know, you have to romance the marketing that you do have. You got to remember, like we have famous brands.
Right.
Rayo's and Carbone, they're both famous brands.
Yes.
And that in itself, on top of that 35%, like at the shelf, that in itself, when you talked about people knowing or realizing the brand, they'll see it on the shelf and they'll go, wow, I know the restaurant. Or vice versa. I remember a famous influencer in 2017. She had over 500,000 followers and now has tens of millions. And I won't say who it was, but she put up a post in front of Rayo's restaurant holding a jar saying, I can't believe my favorite sauce company owns a restaurant.
Amazing.
And that's a reality. Like once these brands grow, you know, how many people, if you think about like a restaurant, you could put 100 people in a restaurant.
Yeah, yeah. It has
Rayo's
no
much less.
availability.
Exactly. There's zero availability.
Did you care a lot about the types of distribution points? Like, were you thinking it's a premium brand, so I have to be in Whole Foods because that's premium distribution? Or was it literally just as much distribution as I can possibly get is the name of the game?
No, you know, look, I think all my customers are my best customers, right? I love every customer and I love them all the same. I think that question's like a very complex question, and it would take an entire podcast to break down.
Yes.
But, you know, you used to start in kind of the natural specialty channel, and it took you like 5 to 7 years before you even got to conventional. And then it took you another 3 years before you got to mass and club. So you had like this 10-year kind of like growth.
So you have to go step by step, basically.
That's all changed though, because the world is blurred, because today's shopper all want better, right? Like you want better when you go into your conventional supermarket, and you want better when you go into your natural supermarket. So those lines have blurred, and everything's changed. But like I said, that's probably 3 podcasts.
I always find this interesting, Eric, because I'm a B2B marketer. I'm not a B2C marketer. And I think of you, in this case, a B2C marketer, but you're talking about your customers are the retailers to a certain extent. So do you think of this as kind of like a B2B game to a certain extent?
Well, I mean, look, the end of the day, this is what makes this business so hard. I talk about the WIFM, the WIIFM. Along the channel of getting to the consumer, there's a lot of people in between you. You have your own employees, you have your company that you've got to take care of.
Yep.
Below that, you've got a broker, and you have to have brokers. They're integral to growing the business, and they have the relationships, and they can help with all the paperwork. They help you with placement. Then you got your distributor, and your distributor needs a margin. Then you've got your retailer, and your retailer needs a margin. You've got whatever agencies you've got to put in there to kind of do all the things. And at the end of the day, you now have to get a consumer, right? So I call it, you know, it's the simplest, hardest business in the world, because you got to find out how to have enough margin in that channel to support it all. And like when you're starting like Carbone, that's a tough one.
Right.
We're going to have to tighten we're going to have to continue to tighten our belt until we can get to that point where whatever that scale is, that we get to take part in the WIFM.
Yep.
But in the beginning, you have to also have the money to make sure everybody else can.
So problem number 1 was, you know, you don't market to empty shelves. So you got to make sure we have distribution on shelves. If you think now about the kind of consumer targeting that you did, was it that they were targeting sort of like upscale consumers, and then you sort of added this influencer layer? Like, what was the targeting strategy in your mind of who the customer was? And did that change?
I don't really believe in target markets. Like I go all the way back to like one of the original founders at Snapple, and I wish I knew who it was. He was asked who his target market was, and he said anyone with a mouth.
Yeah. My client
my target market's anybody who wants good food.
Yeah. My client at a Colgate used to say the target audience, people with teeth. So it's the same idea. So that's fascinating in and of itself, which I think brings me to, I know we have time for two more questions. One is this idea of the Ehrenberg-Bass playbook, which is what initially brought us to Rayo's, which is this philosophy of how you grow a brand. It's all about mental availability and physical availability. Jon and I were kind of debating on the podcast, like, did Rayo's know what that was and was intentionally applying that? Or were you applying it and then later somebody called it Ehrenberg-Bass marketing? Like, did you ever come across that as the playbook?
I still have no idea. I'm going to have to go read this since you've got the question. I honestly never have heard about it.
Never heard that.
Someone at Sobos may have, right? Like,
yeah, well, this guy Todd. Do you know this guy Todd Lachman?
I know Todd Lachman. Yeah, I know Todd. I know Todd very well. I sold the business to him.
Because he came from Mars, which is an Ehrenberg-Bass shop. So it sounds like maybe you were already doing Ehrenberg-Bass marketing, and maybe this guy came in who had heard of that, and he kind of put a name.
No, he actually bought in a different system of management. I can't remember the name. It was interesting that he had collected along the way, and he bought in someone to do kind of like here's how you hold your weekly meetings, and here's a structure for this and how you follow up on things. And it was and like for me, it was tremendous learning. So happy he did it, because now I employ it today. I was probably intuitively doing what the man explained, and then I actually took what I was intuitively doing and made it way better.
Yeah.
So like that's why I'm excited to read about this marketing thing, because maybe Todd employed that, and maybe you just gave me an unlock.
I think so. That's our conspiracy theory, because he used in the Wall Street Journal article, they used the term mental and physical availability, which is the Ehrenberg-Bass term. So that's what got us thinking.
But isn't that just what marketing is? Isn't that just what like putting product on shelves is? You have to be available.
Yes.
And then you can't market if you're not available. So you market after you're. I don't know. It seems all intuitive to me.
I completely agree with you. I think it is intuitive, but you'd be surprised how few marketers understand. They think you have to have a very tightly defined target market, and that it's all about advertising. They don't think about distribution in some cases. So it's actually
and it's funny because a lot of marketers, and it aggravates me, like they talk about awareness. I don't care about awareness. I care about penetration. Mm-hmm. And that's where you've got to kind of dive into. And when you like awareness marketing for people like us is a waste of money. When you're where Rayo's is now, it's the only thing you should be doing. You've already got 23% household penetration. So the only way you're going to get more when you have 58% awareness is to increase that awareness, right?
Yeah. By the way, this is already funny because Ehrenberg-Bass says all that matters is penetration. That's like their number one.
Oh, you're kidding. That's because that's all I care about. Like, we were marketing high funnel in the early days on here, and I went right to the bottom of the mid funnel, and that's where I'm staying. And I'm staying there for a period of time because.
But that's because you already have. That's because Carbone is already famous, right? If it wasn't famous, presumably you would have to build.
What do you think Carbone's awareness is?
Well, I guess if I'm talking about the mass market in the United States,
aided awareness,
probably 30%.
Yeah, 17.
Okay.
All right. So like the awareness isn't necessarily there, but as I said with Rayo's, like when I was actually selling the company to Todd, and I didn't coin this phrase, my head of sales did, but we said we don't have consumers at Rayo's. We have rabid fans of the brand.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we had. I mean, we had 1.8% household penetration at the time, but we were doing enough volume to be able to sell it for a nice number and know it was platform for the next person to really, really do well. And that's, I love talking about Rayo's, but I was a steward of the brand for a few years. That's really what I was. And they had a lot of good stewards along the way.
Yeah. Well, I guess pivot to do you have to leave in 60 seconds, by the way?
No, I can stay on a couple of minutes.
All right. Just maybe a few extra minutes because I don't want to rush this one. If you think about your experience at Rayo's and now at Carbone, what are you carrying through that you learned at Rayo's, and what are you doing differently?
Probably none. I had to, every brand's different. You kind of got to learn the brand, and our flywheel is so much different than Rayo's flywheel as to how I get this brand out here. Yeah, as I said, I've done awareness stuff. I did TV commercials on CTV a few years back, right? And like and again, this is where the awareness thing is. The marketing agency's like, well, look at what happened to awareness, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm looking at it was a specific chain. I said, I'm looking at a specific chain, and they were only up 6% after I ran all this, so obviously it didn't work, right? And they hate me for this because for me, it comes down to more cases on shelves, more consumers buying my brand is what works. More people knowing about my brand, I don't care. Like I know eventually it'll catch up and people will buy it, but it's just not this early in the game. We have to be marketing to our customers, to the people who want our brand, and this happens to be a very lifestyle brand. So our whole thing is event, social, PR.
Event, social, PR. Got it. But it's a famous restaurant moving into the premium pasta sauce category. There's got to be some playbook that transfers across. It sounds like there is, which is partially like the focus on distribution.
Look, the focus on distribution and the PR side of it, right? Like that restaurant, there's a halo effect every time Mario Carbone does something with his restaurant. And I'm grateful to have that halo effect. I'm grateful to not have had to build a brand. Like think about it. I went there and Jeff Zelaznik, one of the owners of Major Food Group, the restaurateur, as we were debating, I'm debating, all right, what does this label have to look like? Jeff's like, why are we even thinking about it? It's the menu. And he took out their big menu, and the picture on our jar is the picture on the front of the menu at Carbone. So we were able to take all of these elements. And if you think about how much time, money, and effort just that alone saves in the beginning, because you already have
don't have to build two brands. You're borrowing the equity from
you have to. Like, it's the smartest thing to do is borrow as much equity as you can where it makes sense.
Right. Got it. Okay. So it's a super unique situation. Can I just ask you really quickly about the SKU point, which I think is really interesting? If most of the money in the Rayo's case, and I would assume in the Carbone case, probably comes from one SKU, why is it so important to have multiple SKUs as opposed to just focus on the core?
It's really not the case anymore. It's not what it used to be, because the category has shifted quite a bit. So marinara was a big SKU for Rayo's back in the day when I was running it. I would imagine it's less right now. Right now, my marinara SKU is 21% of the business. Right? Like I would have expected that to be in the 50s when I started. When I started this 5-6 years ago, you've got a you've got a younger customer that is experimenting. They're using it to cook. They're doing those type of things. So having the additional SKUs, but the answer to that question is availability and space sells. You have one SKU on the shelf, you're not visible. That 35% that's making the decision of the consumer, if you have one facing, they might not find you. You have enough facings, they'll find you. And if you have a different offerings, they'll try them.
Right.
They may not go back to them, but they're going to try them, right?
So having multiple SKUs gives you more distribution on the shelf, and then it makes you relevant in more different types of purchase occasions of different types of things you might want to be cooking it with.
Absolutely.
Super interesting. Okay, final question, Eric. This is a bonus question. Given your time there, are you able to get a reservation at Rayo's, or are you like the rest of us, just totally locked out?
I'm totally locked out. I'm sure if I wanted to go. I have not been to Rayo's since I left the company. I haven't been to Rayo's New York. I have been to Rayo's LA several times. I went to Rayo's Miami just this past year because I happened to be there. Frank Pellegrino Jr. and I are still friends. It's not like because I went and took on another competitor that I'm, not allowed in there.
Yeah.
I just haven't had the opportunity or the need to go to New York. And quite honestly, I have Carbone to go to.
Yeah, you have Carbone too. So I guess follow-up question, can you get us a reservation at Carbone?
If you really needed one and you give me 30 days notice, I'm treated like no differently than anybody
I'm desperate,
else.
Eric. I've only been to the one in Las Vegas, which by the way was incredible. I'm still
Las
thinking
Vegas
about
is great.
The focaccia. The focaccia was like the most delicious thing I've ever had.
Yeah. When they put out the bread and the salami and the cheese in the beginning, you're almost done with your meal by the time you're getting ready to order.
You are. Well, you've already done such a great favor for us, Eric, coming on the podcast. But a reservation at Carbone, like we don't push our luck. I think it'd be a great extra added value that we'd be forever grateful for. So just thank you, Eric, so much for your time. Hugely appreciate it. Super insightful and very excited to fold it into the episode because we talked about a lot of these themes.
Great.
Well, that was absolutely fascinating. We thank Eric for his time on the podcast, a true legend in marketing in the pasta sauce category. Let's head back to the studio. I think Jon probably misses me.
I think we can make a number of very straightforward predictions about Carbone.
Let's
from
hear
this.
them, Johnny. Let's hear the Carbone predictions.
Well, Carbone, like Rayo's, has opened in other locations, Miami and Vegas.
Right.
Same thing as Rayo's.
And there's Rayo's there
right?
too.
Same
yeah.
exact thing. Although Rayo's apparently not in Vegas anymore. So that's one. So you're going to have this idea of like we will open in other select premium markets. Then you're going to obviously have sauce, and they have the spicy rigatoni sauce,
Spicy
right?
rigatoni sauce.
Or
so
spicy
kind of
vodka
one
sauce.
SKU. You start
Right,
with
so
one
you start
SKU.
the kind of like the key SKU, the special sauce, so to speak. I mean, I'm sure it probably already exists today, although I haven't seen it. Then you're going to imagine there's going to be pasta. I believe there is pasta already. Then there's going to be chicken parm. There's going to be eggplant parm. There's going to be, Italian wedding soup.
And you know what there's really got to be, if I can just make a product suggestion. I've only been to Carbone once in my life, and the killer app there is an actual app, which is the focaccia. They got to bring that focaccia to market. It's incredible. You remember that?
Well, I think you and I have identified focaccia as a possible premium, product.
Yes.
That
After
it needs to exist
we're
in a different
finished
way in New York.
scaling
Right.
the Evidenza Corporation, you
Right.
can expect Jon and I to push hard into the focaccia market.
Gotcha focaccia.
Gotcha focaccia. We even have a brand. We even have a jingle. But
We
I
have
don't
a
think we're
brand.
ready.
We have a jingle. It rhymes. Gotcha
Jingle, we got
focaccia.
branding. It's gonna be it's gonna be a sensation.
But yeah, you can literally like predict pretty, I would say easily, what Carbone is doing.
Right.
I mean, obviously the fact that the CEO is from Rayo, Sovos now to Carbone tells you pretty much what's going to happen. And it's working, I would say, without question.
Also, just again to make parallels in other categories, we always used to talk about Amazon, right? What did Amazon start with?
They started with books.
Books, right? So it didn't start as the everything store. It started as the book
The
store.
one thing store.
The one thing store, because that was actually the easiest thing to ship.
Yeah.
And then brick by brick, Amazon added new things that you could buy until it was everything, right?
Yeah,
and they
and-
probably
and-
also went after like nerds who read books. It's probably a pretty small market at first because most people don't read. Until now, you buy your toothpaste on Amazon.
I believe the Amazon idea is that they needed things that were the exact same online and offline because they needed to. Basically, there's a lot of people who are skeptical of buying things online, and a book online and offline is the same thing. I think the second product for them was a CD because the CD online and offline is the exact same thing. So it's a little bit like the sauce online and offline is the same thing. But I mean, it's just, Amazon is arguably in the e-commerce world, I think without question, or not arguably, without question, probably the best marketing organization in the world.
So I think we covered the strategy, right? They segmented the audience, they segmented the audience, they targeted this underserved segment of premium buyers. They positioned against these premium category entry points with a premium, no sugar added product with a very distinctive brand. Maybe let's finish with some of the tactical choices they made. So that was the strategy. What were the tactics? The tactics, of course, can be grouped into these 4 Ps: product, price, placement, and promotion. So how do you grow a 10-person restaurant to a $3 billion CPG acquisition? It's not just having a smart strategy. It's having very smart execution with the 4 Ps, with product, price, placement, and promotion. So from a product perspective, of course, Rayo's has a very particular product that supports its premium positioning.
Yeah, I mean, restaurant quality Italian sauce at home, that special sauce. I mean, the premium product is everything. And the premium product actually is an intangible product. It's the experience at the restaurant that gets converted into this physical product. So again, in some sense, it's a great, in this case, brand extension, which I love. Pricing, super important.
Right. So if it's a premium brand, then you got to have premium pricing. And sure enough, Rayo's has premium pricing.
And I love this idea of twice the price.
Twice the price.
It's $6, $7, $8 when everything else is, like a third of that. I mean, it's fascinating that they can go to market at such a premium in a typically everyday, or used to be everyday category.
And of course, marketers always forget about the P of price and pricing. It's the most neglected P, but it's probably the most valuable one, right? Like, if you can charge twice as much money, then you can have half as many sales and still make just as many profits, right? There's that great research from Wharton that a 1% increase in price is a 10% increase in profits. It flows right to the bottom line, right? So the idea that all these strategic choices support the premium price price, which makes the economics of the business 100 times better than a Prego or a Ragu. That's just absolutely critical to their success.
Yeah, this is actually, the Medicis invented double entry bookkeeping. So
finally,
the Medicis,
I thought we might go a whole episode without hearing about the fucking Medicis, but here we are.
The Medicis basically invented kind of modern finance in some ways. And this is actually one of the covered parts of this story. Rayo's must be exceptionally well run from a financial perspective because the premium pricing, to your point, they have higher margins, and that just allows them to fund more of their growth, negotiate better terms with the distributors, and just continue to grow more quickly than the competitors. And you basically see that. I mean, if you can be premium, be premium.
Of course. So then you've got placement. We talked a little about this, but, they already had mental availability. People had heard of Rayo's, and they increased mental availability through advertising, of course. But then they needed physical availability. They needed placement or distribution. In fact, that was kind of the key to their success, right?
Yeah, I mean, this placement P, super important. Distribution is destiny. Distribution and placement are the same idea, right? It's probably the most important P. And I love how they start out as being hyper-local. Then they distribute to being more local, but again, through select gourmet locations, to being maybe regional, and then to being national. And that's a 30-year process where they never compromised on quality, they never compromised on price, and they never compromised on being premium. And that just allows them to become now a global or probably more international brand, even because they're in Canada. They're basically they have premium prices at increasingly, regional and I guess national scale, which is amazing.
And in premium locations, right? At first, it was sold in these premium locations like Whole Foods, right? I think, again, this is all part of an integrated strategy. It's like, if you're premium, then you need to be being sold at Whole Foods and not Walmart, right? It's also true from an advertising perspective. Apple advertises on the Champs-Élysées. They don't necessarily advertise in the subway, right? Because it's a premium brand. So the idea that placement itself can support the premiumization, sort of another critical part of their success.
And this is all, it's about signaling. Signaling it's a quality brand, right. A high quality product that deserves the premium pricing. That's actually super important. I love it.
And then, of course, you've got the promotion, the advertising, right? The marketing. And we've looked at many ads from them over the years, culminating in this Winter Olympics ad, right? Where they are taking the same premium positioning, the same distinctive asset, the same category entry points, and just marketing that at scale to increase their mental availability alongside their physical availability.
I would frame this one very differently.
So go ahead.
I would say this P promotion is not about advertising. This is more about PR and about myth making and about storytelling. And it's about marketing not at scale, but marketing at not scale. That's to me what this is all about, the myth of the place. The whole point of this place is they basically don't really advertise. It's all word of mouth. It's all word of mouth tied in kind of like the mob and kind of this kind of nostalgia and the way that it used to be in A Bronx Tale or The Godfather or Goodfellas or Casino. This is fascinating to me. I mean, I can't think of, there's just nothing else I can think of like this even in the Italian kind of food world, it's so unique.
Well,
but
I think
scaling that unique with fame is amazing.
It's either or, I don't think it's both, right? Yes, they get a lot of earned media from the restaurant, right? Everybody talks about Rayo's, how they want to go to Rayo's. That actually builds mental availability for the pasta sauce, right? And then the pasta sauce itself gets coverage and gets talked about. I learned of Rayo's from my sister, who's a chef, and she cooks with Rayo's, right? So there certainly is a word of mouth and a PR and a mystique, but they do also advertise. I mean, if you run an advertisement in the Winter Olympics, you're an advertiser. What percentage of their money is spent on advertising? Who could say? But I'm sure they did that alongside.
I would imagine a lot of their money was spent on maybe slotting fees, eye level is buy level, or a lot of their money was spent on in-store promotion, or a lot of it was spent on sampling. So I think there's lots of ways that I'm sure promotion worked. One of the things I read was that they, they would do very specific influencer type of sampling before that was an idea, with very select people who were in the gourmet food scene in New York City, or maybe that kind of idea. So I'm sure that it was done. I'd love to know more. I'm sure there's a story here that we could learn about.
So let's maybe wrap up with some of the results, right? It's nice to talk about the wonderful strategy and tactics they executed, but what were the outcomes? What were the commercial outcomes of this decision? Well, according to their SEC exhibits, in fiscal year 2023, Rao's had reached 16% household penetration, up from like 1% a decade earlier. And their aided awareness, which is sort of a quasi version of mental availability, had increased to 63%, right? Ultimately culminating in Rao's homemade 24-ounce marinara being the #1 selling SKU in the pasta and pizza sauce category.
There's an important point again about keeping to the core here. Even 30 years later, they have pasta products, they have pizza products, they have lasagna products,
and they have lots
soup
of different
products.
sauces.
But the #1 product that they
marinara.
have is the marinara.
Right.
It's like the core product, the hero product. The special sauce is still the special sauce. There's something about always investing in the core that people can forget sometimes. Like McDonald's, I think a while ago was like, oh, we're going to invest in all these new products, like get a special shake,
Right.
like an Oreo shake, get an M&M shake. And then they realized actually that was hurting their business. And the right thing to do is like have people buy a burger.
Yeah,
And when they buy a burger,
McNuggets,
they also buy a
McNuggets,
shake.
McNuggets, right.
Right, so
Yeah,
it's
the
like the
marinara
core.
sauce is also interesting because it's relevant to the most buying occasions. Like we buy mostly the marinara because you can use it with the pasta and you can use it with the chicken. You can use it in lots of different buying situations. They have these other SKUs like arrabbiata sauce, right? But the use cases are more limited for that. So even your product, thinking about like how transferable is your product across category
This
entry
is like
points.
buying Coca-Cola. This
Right.
is the Coca-Cola of sauce.
Right. The Coca-Cola of sauce.
Too much sauce. No
Sauce,
such
The
thing.
salience of sauce.
This is also, one of the finance guys we like, Howard Marks. He always says, keep the main thing the main thing.
Yep.
And that's what you see here with the #1 selling SKU in pasta. We talked a lot about positioning, and obviously, we understand category entry points, but if you really want to understand how to position your product, you'd like to do some research to figure out, is there an opportunity to position? Like, what is an under-positioned opportunity, or how might I think about counter positioning?
But it's so hard to do research, John. It's so slow and expensive. How would we possibly produce research for our little podcast?
Well, if only we ran a synthetic research company,
A
Peter.
synthetic research company called Evidenza. Thank God we have that at our disposal.
So in this session, which we call $1 Million Data, we're going to go on the offenza with some data from Evidenza, trying to understand how Rao's is positioned or understood in the category versus other pasta sauces. So this is just, we surveyed 1,068 U.S. residents,
synthetic
respondents who have purchased sauce in the last month.
Right.
And
So
we're
they're
just trying to
category
understand, pasta category buyer or sauce category buyers. How do they think about the different brands in the category? And there's some really interesting stuff which talks about the premiumization, which is obviously a long-running trend at this point, but Rao's has really nailed it in the sauce category. We just asked people in each of the below kind of, consider each of the below associations, which brand most comes to mind. So we asked about, for a premium or a special meal, 40% of people selected Rao's. The next highest brand was Bertolli's at 7.5%. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's a 6x difference.
They dominate special meal, premium meal when it comes to pasta sauce. So that really tells you the core actually is the core
Right.
in that way.
Well, it also tells you their advertising it tells you their marketing is effective at associating the brand with a very particular category entry point or purchase occasion.
I mean, that's again where the price is the message. It signals this is the premium sauce for the premium meal. If you ask again, which of the brands do you most associate with being most authentically Italian? It gets, it's 2 times higher than the next brand, which is Bertolli's. If you ask about, which tastes the most homemade, it's actually, twice as big as Classico. If you ask about high quality ingredients, it's double the 365 Whole Foods brand. I mean, so it's just, it's the #1 SKU because it now dominates multiple associations, multiple category entry points.
Yeah, I love that. And, this is the other thing about price, which we've talked about. It looks like the synthetic respondents, 45% of it described it as expensive but worth it, right? Very few people thought it was reasonably priced, 11.5%. But, they could justify the price point because they also associate it with superior taste and flavor quality.
This is the #1 thing I'd like people to think about our brand, expensive but worth it. It's also, I believe, what the idea for Stella Artois was, reassuringly expensive.
Reassuringly expensive, yeah.
So this idea of again, if you can design a product from scratch, you will always start with premium positioning. And Rayo's did that. And other brands like, Stella are trying to do that. Like pricing is, Buffett says the most important decision you make in business is pricing, right? Is price.
So maybe let's wrap with what are some lessons B2B marketers can learn from the success of Rayo's? I think number one is this idea that growth is a function of mental and physical availability. You need to be easy to mind and easy to find, and Rayo's won on both of those dimensions. It had high mental availability because of this famous restaurant, and then they scaled distribution to have increased physical availability. So if you're a B2B marketer, you got to think about, do people know of my brand? Do they think of it? Do the right people think of it in the right purchase occasions? That's segmentation and positioning. And then do I have a pricing, advertising, and distribution strategy and a product strategy that supports those strategic decisions, right?
Yes. For me, it's clearly a mental and physical availability story. I think the premium angle is really interesting, really fun. This idea of distribution is destiny. I keep coming back to that. Again, they have this very specific, highly priced product. They're very intentional about the product and the pricing. And then the distribution is all about, again, like hyper local, New York premium locations, maybe then more regional, then national, but it's premium through the line, premium pricing, premium consumer, and then premium line extensions into pasta and into soups and into lasagna and pizza. And it's a wonderful story about premiumization, actually.
Right. And strategic expansion from a niche to a bigger niche to a bigger niche, from one SKU to multiple SKUs, but over the course of 100 years. And there's, of course, this wonderful strategic irony that who bought Rayo's in the end? Campbell's, which is probably like the most mass market mental physical availability organization in the world as it relates to like sauces and soups, right? So now it's easy to imagine what's going to happen, right? Which is Campbell's is going to take its expertise in distribution, physical availability, and mental availability, and it's just going to multiply everything Rayo's was doing by 10 or 100 and grow it that way.
I can even imagine a world in which, the kind of slots on the shelves that used to go to Campbell's soup are now going to go to Rayo's sauce because honestly, the margin profile is just so much better.
Right.
It's just a better financial decision for someone like a Campbell's. Like,
yeah, and Campbell's, probably needs to diversify the category, right?
For
People
sure.
don't buy as much frozen, or people don't buy as much, mass market soup as they used to, with all these health concerns and this focus on quality ingredients. And now they have a foothold in that fast growing premium category through Rayo's.
There's also a really nice idea around category entry points here. You have to figure out how you're going to basically position in the market, like what occasion or situation are you going to try to win. And for them, it's the special sauce occasion. But then you don't just want to own special. You want to really own every day. And every day is a function of like having a product they can eat every day. And then also not just having a product that needs to be cooked every day, but sometimes it's a product that can be heated up. So they've moved into every day, into convenience. And that's where you see soups and you see pizza and lasagna as frozen products that you can just heat up. And so it's just a wonderful story around kind of, in this case, share of plate. Like you start with a special meal, maybe just the Sunday meal, the Saturday meal, then you want to get the Monday meal, the Tuesday meal,
Monday, Tuesday,
the whole
Wednesday,
thing.
Friday.
So it's wonderful.
Well, hopefully this episode helps deliver on your ultimate ambition, Jon, of going to Rayo's. Perhaps the proprietors of Rayo's are interested in B2B marketing and synthetic research and will become fans of the podcast, listen to this and just say, we got to lend these guys a table, maybe even give us a table permanently. I think that's a very likely outcome from this episode. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the inaugural brand breakdown. We're going to be doing a lot more of these with different brands, showing how they apply the Ehrenberg-Bass playbook. If you like the format, let us know. Let us know how we can improve, especially Johnny. Let Johnny know how he can improve. He's got a lot of room for improvement. I think we can all agree.
Yeah, we would love to hear your feedback on the special sauce. And if you work at Rayo's or know somebody who works at Rayo's, we especially want your feedback.
We want to hear from you lickety-split.
We want your food back.
Well, I think that's it for this week on Lab Grown Marketing.
Make sure to join us next time for another episode on marketing effectiveness and AI intelligence.
And if you want to stay ahead of the two biggest revolutions in marketing, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn.
I'm Jon Lombardo, you're Peter Weinberg. And if you're ready to see what lab-grown research and strategy can do for your brand, please visit us, of course, at evidenza.ai. Ciao for now.